Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Great show for you guys today. It's going to be one of our last shows about this year's draft cycle because guess what? The draft is next week. So most of our stuff from here on out will be ramping up toward the draft, the last couple nuggets. But before we got to that point, I wanted to spend a little bit of time allowing our two draft guys on this show to really give some love to their favorite players in this draft. And those are going to be players all across the board because letting them list off 10 guys in the first round is not productive, nor is it fair. It's way too easy of an exercise. So today is our guys in the 2024 NFL draft. And here to help me with that are our two draft analysts here at The Athletic. First of all, it's my good friend, Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Every part of the draft cycle, you hit the checkpoints, just like the season. So like this feels like, we would always kind of cover this, us three on this, and I'm excited to get into Detroit, but I'm very, very excited to go over the show because I get to talk about our guys. And it's not the Knox. It's not the, I don't know. It's not, no, these guys are all stars. Trust us by the end of the show. Can't wait.
Yeah, as if there's not enough unrelenting positivity on this show. Also joining us today, it is our draft expert here at The Athletic. It's Dane Brugler. Dane, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm excited to do this. This will be fun, kind of a chance for us to gush like we've been doing. I think a lot of these names will be predictable, but maybe a few surprises. I don't know. We'll see. But I was doing some research last night. This is going to be the second time ever in the history, Super Bowl era. We've had 57 drafts. This is only going to be the second time ever we're going to have all offense with the first 7 picks. And if, say the Falcons trade out of 8, say someone trades up for Rome Odunze, it'll be the first time ever we see offense the first 8 picks. So it's going to be an offensive-heavy first round, and not a big surprise, but it's just interesting putting it in that type of context. Because the other time it happened was the 2021 draft, which is interesting. There's parallels because that's the year we had quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3. We had receivers go early. Very
receivers
offensive-heavy.
go 4, 5, 6, right? If you count Pitts as a receiver.
Yeah. Right. And then you had with the first defensive player was J.C. Horn at 8. But, then Surtain was after him. Micah Parsons was worked in there. But, yeah, just interesting the parallels between the 2021 class and then this year's draft.
Before we get into this, just a quick reminder. We are a week away, if you guys are listening to this on Thursday, from the 2024 NFL draft. We will be coming to you guys live from Detroit on YouTube on the first and second nights of the draft, rounds 1 through 3. Every single pick, we will have reactions, analysis, got some fun bells and whistles we're going to trot out. So please come join us on YouTube on night 1 and night 2 as we break down everything. It's one of my favorite things we do on the show. We've done it for the last several years. It's a really good time. Very excited about it. So just want to keep reminding you guys about it, keep poking you guys about it, and get you there on draft night because we are very excited about what we're going to be trotting out. Today, just some parameters for the exercise. Like I said, we're not just going to let people list off 5 top 10 picks as their favorite players in the draft. So we're going to break this down into 4 separate categories. Guys in the top 10, because I'm going to give you one. I think that's fair. First round, day 2 guys, and then players who are outside of the top 100 consensus board. So some of these names up near the top, names you guys have probably heard on the 100 shows we've done over the last month about the draft. Names a little bit later on this show, probably names that you have not heard quite yet as part of these conversations. Dane, I am going to give you the honors here and let you kick this off. Who is your guy in the top 10 of this year's NFL draft?
Yeah, and you could go a few different ways here, but I kept coming back to Malik Nabers. Not even my number 1 receiver this year. That's Marvin Harrison Jr. But Malik Nabers is my favorite of this group. He's fireworks, man. I mean, he's fun to watch. And, you want explosive plays. All right. He led the FBS 34 catches of 20 plus yards. He's still just 20 years old. Doesn't turn 21 until the end of July. And the last 2 years, led the SEC in catches. I mean, you think about the long list of receivers that have come out of LSU, yet nobody has more catches in a career than Malik Nabers. So, he is the total package when it comes to the physical skill set, when it comes to the production, and then also the ceiling. I think he probably has the highest ceiling of these top 3 receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the most NFL ready. He's the craftiest of the group. And he's also really physically gifted as well. Rome Odunze might even be the safest of the top three, but I think Malik Nabers has the highest ceiling and the most wow potential to create these big plays. And so no matter who gets him in the first round, I cannot wait to tune in and see what they do. And, even if he goes to, with all due respect, like the Giants, where, the quarterback situation's a little up in the air, it's going to be fun to watch because he's inevitable. He's going to be able to create those big plays.
What's the moment that you feel like you fell in love with him? Do you remember when it was?
I think I was watching him over the summer. Like, I knew who he was just from the past years, but watching him over the summer, I think it was the SEC championship game against Georgia, when his acceleration was just different. I mean, he's running by these Georgia DBs like it's nothing. And it's like, okay, you can do that. Okay, you've got something here. And then the ability to make plays at the catch point, but it all comes back to those explosive plays. It doesn't matter the DBs he's going up against. If the quarterback can find you, he's going to go make a play. And some of it's catch and run. I think that's a big factor here too. I think, we've talked about it before with Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe that's not something in his bag that he relies on unless he's got that clear runway. With Malik Nabers, he can make a guy miss. He has the wiggle, but then also the ability to just eliminate those pursuit angles from defenders. So being the total package and having the most explosiveness to your game, that all factors in here.
Nate, let's stick with the receivers here because one of your guys in the top 10, one of your guys, was Rome Odunze, who Dane just called potentially the safest receiver available in the top 10. Why Rome Odunze for you over a couple of these other guys that maybe other people have graded slightly higher?
Yeah, and that's funny what Dane just said. Marvin Harrison Jr. is also my receiver one. But
it's not interesting to say that Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of your favorite players in the draft.
Oh, you like Tom Hanks?
Yeah. It says nothing about you.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Meryl Streep's pretty good. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is just, separate conversation for me. But Odunze, what Dane said, he's safe, but I don't want to downplay what he brings to the table. I think I keep coming back to the word useful, which I usually use for guys that are more middle round guys, that are more dirty work guys. He's like a supreme useful. Like he is instead of just a $10 Swiss Army knife, he is a $150 one, fancy one that I bought from huckberry.com. Like he is just he is that kind of version. Like he can just do a little bit of everything. And that's why I like him. His game, and I'll use this line again, is scheme proof and situation proof. This is what I think. And I think that's where Dane is saying that he's safe. He catches the ball well at all three levels. He's a good route runner at all three levels. He catches contested catches. He's great with the adjustments, got good hands, can create a little bit of the yards with the ball in his hands, yards after catch on screens and all over the place, can line up inside, can line up outside, can beat press, kind of just does everything well. I think that's why I like him so much. So many receivers might be missing that one thing that causes me hesitation. And Odunze doesn't have anything missing, even if some of the skills aren't exceptional or excellent. Like Nabers has that ace in the hole. He can create. Nabers can create. That is such an exceptional skill to have.
Especially these days.
Yes, their explosive plays are so valuable right now. But I think with even on Odunze, he can do that well, but not excellent. But that's the thing. That's why I like him, is no matter what, I can just picture him being a contributor and being good no matter what the situation or what it asks to do. And I think that's why it comes back that I just like him so much because of that high floor and a little bit higher ceiling than I think he's been getting.
It's so hard to think of Odunze not working, right? I don't care where he goes. It is so hard to envision him going to a situation where he just doesn't work out. So that's
where I think come back to.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a safe prospect, but he's the closest thing to that, where it's just hard to see him not produce at the NFL level.
Which is funny that your love of him is rooted in that idea, Nate. The fact that you feel so good about turning in the card. He exists kind of within a narrow band of outcomes. Your other guy in the top 10 has been painted in the exact opposite light during this entire draft process, and that is Drake Maye from North Carolina.
Yeah, and that's the high end play, but it's the opposite. I think the discussion is that his floor is higher than he's been given credit for. People are acting like he's an overhaul project, and
he has to sit for 3 years. What are you talking about?
Oh my God, right? Jordan Love's trajectory. I think he should be just like Jordan Love. I'm like, oh my God, like what am I watching here? What am I? I don't know.
It's so weird to me because
there's such a disconnect.
We've talked about this, and even beyond the process stuff and the accuracy, which even if you want to ding him for that, fine, I get that. But around so many other prospects over the last 4 or 5 years, we've talked about how athleticism establishes the floor. If you can scramble and you have that break in case of emergency side of your game that allows you to survive early in your career, he has that. It's not like he's a big stiff in the pocket. And if he's going to be a little bit inaccurate, he gives you nothing in some of those problem-solving situations. So even that argument is kind of hard for me to understand or process.
And even the creativity is what I just keep coming back to. It's like the negative play mitigation, not just sacks, but just creating stuff out of thin air. We just talked about that with Nabers, but that's why Caleb's, of course, gets the praise for it, deservedly so. But that's what I feel like I'm going crazy. It's like May does this like really well. And I also think the mental side, that's what I don't think he needs to sit. If we're talking footwork and timing, some of these guys that are watching him, some of these guys I'm just talking about, just Twitter stuff, but is that they're grading him like he has to be in a West Coast Bill Walsh offense. This offense is so sloppy and so loose that's why you have to grade what he's doing in that situation. Of course, his time is going to be off. They're not doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 throw. It's drift, fade in the pocket. Oh, there's space, throw. So that's why the translation, I think, has kind of gotten off with him. And I also think everyone's like, oh, he's got to sit. What? Because of footwork? Well, It's not the mental side, because I know for sure it's not. So that's why I think there's such a disconnect. And I think that narrative has taken on a whole life of its own. Now he needs to sit automatically. Now it's like, I'm the complete opposite. Let him play. Let him figure out what he can get away with. Let him make mistakes, because the high end stuff is so exceptional. It's what you create. It's what teams should be striving to get on their team, even if there's going to be some blemishes early. I just think that's why I like him. I think the ceiling is just so sky high.
It reminds me of the Anthony Richardson conversation a little bit last year, but he's so much further along than Anthony Richardson was. So I don't really understand that.
If you believe he has the mental toughness to work through the mistakes, then absolutely he should be starting. And it's one thing I love about Drake Maye is I do think he has that mental toughness. I mean, he got his butt kicked at North Carolina behind that offensive line, and with someone with what the receivers were doing and not always helping him out. I don't think he's going to have a problem, taking his lumps and, battling through those mistakes and being better because of it. So he's not going to be a guy that shrinks when he does make a mistake, like we've seen some of these rookie quarterbacks do. So, yeah, I'll be shocked if we don't see Drake Maye starting in September for whatever team drafts him, whether that's the Patriots or the Commanders, whoever. He should be out there early. And, again, it won't be all perfect, but he'll learn. And when we look back at this draft 3 years from now, I think there will be some teams that maybe regret passing on him.
Yeah, I'll just leave one last line on May, is because we probably won't talk about him again until draft day. Is anyone that's not used some of these games as his negative? I think Virginia has been one game that raised knocks. Yes, the first couple drives, and some people that go through all 22, that's might be all what they watch. There are some misses. Watch that game the last 2.5 quarters and watch what that dude is doing. That is a guy putting a team on his freaking back and making throw after throw and run after run and decision after decision. That's helping the team almost win. They should have won, but that is a game that's like, just keep watching. There's just so much to like. So Dane, sorry, last line is that the baseball adjusting thing too. Like Dane said, he can adjust. He's going to have that mental strength. There's so many guys they talk about in baseball. They jump up to the MLB and they don't know how to adjust. What do you mean the swing doesn't work? I have to move back in my stance a little bit. The best ones do. The best ones realize that what they were doing, they have to work off of that. May already shows that he's done that a little bit, and that's why, again, I'm optimistic about him.
I just think if you look back at quarterback development history and quarterback development success stories over the last 5 to 10 years, and we don't necessarily need to paint Anthony Richardson in that light already. He played a handful of games, but looked competent in those games, despite how raw he was coming in, right? But these things like footwork and accuracy and refinement, that stuff can get worked on. That stuff can get fixed. You can do so much work in the offseason with a quarterback guru. We have so much information and tools around the kinesiology and how you're supposed to throw a football now. You can fine-tune that stuff. What you can't fine-tune is talent, ability, creativity, feel, sense. And that's why I was willing to bet on Anthony Richardson last year. It wasn't just physical talent. It was watching his feel for the pocket and his ability to understand and navigate that space. And when you watch Drake Maye play, it's not big arm throw far. That's not why he's attractive. It's those same sort of characteristics that Anthony Richardson had to an extent, and the reason I was willing to bet on it. And I think Maye has enough of that where if we're talking about some fine-tuning and some tweaks, that's something that I'm just fine having to work through for a little while, for an offseason or two.
I know.
Josh Allen, right? Like, and we shouldn't hold up Josh Allen as like, as the example for how it can work, because he is an exception in a lot of these ways. But we do have, I think, more tools in a modern era of quarterback development and quarterback teaching that leave me a little bit more bullish on guys who have this sort of profile coming into the NFL.
It's May and Richardson. This is what I think they've gotten underrated. Even Richardson last year is they play quarterback well. They do the quarterback things on top of the traits, and that's why I'm excited about them. But the footwork stuff too, I think always comes up. Everyone thinks that especially these 3 magic drills that the coaches put them through, and all of a sudden, boom, all of a sudden they're better. Look at Josh Allen. You worked with Jordan Palmer, and all of a sudden they changed his throwing style. His throwing style didn't change. His footwork changed. And what the footwork was, he stopped overstriding. And a lot of times when guys overstride, they feel late. And I've talked about this a few times. JJ McCarthy, this can happen to him. They overstride, the accuracy wanes. But that is because they feel late mentally. Oh, I didn't see that guy come open. I had to wait till he comes open. Now I got to gun that ball in. Guys get better when they get it slows down for them mentally, and then the footwork comes better, and then the accuracy becomes better. It all starts up top, and that's again why I think he needs the reps, because then he realizes the actual timing and what he's getting away with. So again, that's fixable. That's just reps.
The Josh Allen comparison, I think, is an apt one, because we talked about this with Drake Maye on the quarterback show. He hasn't played quarterback solely for that long. He played multiple sports for most of his childhood. He's not one of these guys who's been going to private quarterback coaches and being a full-time football player since he was 10 years old, Dane. Isn't that right?
His dad was basically his quarterback coach. Yeah. His dad was a former quarterback, but I mean, he grew up in a big basketball family, and he was a shortstop. I mean, he was a multi-sport focused guy growing up, and so the fact that he's
shortstop.
He's just 3 years removed from high school. He's still a young player, 22 years old, or going to be 22 years old. So yeah, he is someone that, again, when you're making a bet on a quarterback, because that's what you're doing when you're drafting a quarterback early, you're making a bet. Give me the guy that, like Drake Maye, who has all these physical and mental skills that you can see on tape that translate to the next level, and I'll take my chances on those guys every day.
And the reason I asked that question is because that's how Josh Allen was. Josh Allen was a multi-sport athlete all the way through high school. And I remember talking to Josh in the fall of 2019. It was his second year as a starter, and you could see some of the refinement coming after a very rough rookie year. And he was telling me, he's like, I didn't spend all these reps and all this time working on my footwork and learning how to be this really refined quarterback. That's not what I did when I was young. And he compared it to me. It was like a golf swing. You know, eventually you get to a place where you can hit your irons pretty well consistently, but then when you take the driver out, it can be difficult. And that was that point in 2019 where his intermediate accuracy had really picked up, but he was struggling throwing the ball deep down the field. And so it's a process for guys who haven't necessarily put as much time on task with these specific quarterback things. And I think that in a lot of ways, Drake Maye falls into a similar category. And I think that's why it's easy to come up with arguments in your mind for how high this can go.
It's a great discussion. Shoot, Anthony Richardson was a receiver until like sophomore year of high school. He didn't train to be a quarterback. so he got into high school. Like, you know, I was going to camps since 8th grade. I was going to the Manning camp every summer in 8th grade, working with pro coaches, you know, like that. I was one of those guys that was groomed to be a quarterback. Some of these guys are just such better athletes that they're like, yeah, I'm playing every sport.
And I think that's better.
It's much better.
Better for your overall development. If you look at
better.
These guys, the way that Joe Burrow played basketball deep into his high school career, like I think that multi-sport background and the looseness that comes with it in just like how you are as an athlete, your feel for certain things, that is harder to teach. That's something that becomes innate over time, where the refined quarterback stuff, you can learn that kind of thing. So that the school of quarterback development, how it works, because I think there was a while, and I think we've gone away from this a little bit, where this and I know Josh Rosen played tennis, but a lot of these guys who I think were overcoached with some of these camps, they were really robotic. And so guys that haven't necessarily come through that same sort of process, and again, have more of a looseness to who they are as athletes, I think you can more easily spin that as a positive than a negative if you're thinking about the ceiling for these players.
Very different position, but that was the same thing with Joe Alt at Notre Dame. He wasn't an offensive tackle, and his dad was a Pro Bowl left tackle. He played in the NFL for a lot of years, but he made sure his son was an athlete, first and foremost, playing all these different sports, was a tight end, quarterback. Wasn't until, all right, finally as a senior in high school, all right, now we'll start to introduce you to offensive line play, and he's so much better for it because of the movements, because of the, he understands his body better, his athletic instincts, and so it's absolutely true across several positions.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to the guys in the first round here as we have a 10-minute quarterback discussion.
I love
this show.
I'm glad.
I'm
Dane,
just surprised you like Drake Maye. I didn't realize that. That's
I
I'm
know.
already learning.
I know.
Yeah.
I've been sitting on it this whole time. I hopefully I didn't hint any of that before the show.
let's get to the guys in the first round. Dane, why don't you kick us off? Quinyon Mitchell is somebody that we've talked about a lot during this process, but even if he's at the top 15 of mock drafts, sneaking up near the top 10, still feels like an unknown to a lot of casual fans. I mean, that's a product that's coming from Toledo. Quinyon Mitchell is one of your guys in the first round. What kind of made you fall in love with him during the process?
He's a very clean player. And over the summer when I first started watching him, I was, okay, this is an early round pick, second round, third round. And I know his head coach very well, Jason Candle. We both have our Mount Union connections, and so I've known him for a long time. And
the mob.
He sent me like some of the numbers, like, oh, hey, he ran a 4.3 for scouts. He's doing this in the weight room. He's doing this, and I was like, okay, this is pretty impressive. I mean, if he comes anywhere close to these numbers during the testing process of the draft, this is going to be impressive. But then throughout the season, he's kind of checking every box. The ball production's off the charts. And so he didn't make my first top 50 in August. And then around Halloween, I do an updated top 50. And I was like, you know what? This guy, he's in the top 50. He should be in there. And this is before anyone's ever, we're not talking about him as a first round player. So I'm like, I'm going to throw him in there. He's like 32 or something. I'm going to throw him in there. And then it's like towards the end of the season, I was like, I don't have him high enough. Like I as much as I like him, he's better than that. And so then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and going into the Senior Bowl, that's who I was like, okay, this is the player that has a chance to really emerge as a winner from the Senior Bowl and someone that could be one of the best defensive players in this class. And that's exactly what he did, because it didn't look too big for him. And I know, talking to him before the Senior Bowl, he was kind of on the fence about whether or not he was going to go, because he didn't really have to. He was already considered to be somewhere in that first round conversation. But so there was something to lose potentially if you didn't have a good week, but there's also something to gain. And that's how he looked at it. He went to Mobile, competed, was the best defensive player, was the best player there, period. And he kind of pushed himself up into that top 15 discussion, goes to the combine, checked that box. So it was a series of checking every box along the way. The season, the production, the ability to go to the Senior Bowl and really shine, even though we're talking about a MAC player, so he didn't have tape against SEC receivers, Big Ten receivers, week in,
Wouldn't
week
that
out.
make it more important to him playing well in Mobile, right? Just as like a leveling exercise?
Yep. No, and that's you want to go to the Senior Bowl to see the guys from FCS, to see the guys from the MAC, to see the Jordan Loves from Utah State, to see how they perform in a setting like that against better players. And that's exactly what he did. He showed out. He was outstanding. So again, it just aced every level of the process. And now he could be the first defensive player drafted. The Falcons have done a lot of work on him. Who knows? Maybe at number 8. If not there, he's going to go, 12 to the Broncos, 13 to the Raiders, 15 to the Colts. It doesn't seem like he's getting out of the top half of round 1.
Hey, can you remember, and I'll put you on the spot a little bit here, can you remember somebody who had a similar sort of rise based on the tape and based on the resume, then went to the Senior Bowl and really helped themselves, but the Senior Bowl was kind of a false signal that their performance at the Senior Bowl wasn't necessarily indicative of where the trajectory should be?
Interesting. So,
because I know a lot of guys on the other side of that, right? Like Terry McLaurin was phenomenal at the Senior Bowl. Terry McLaurin's a third-round pick. Terry McLaurin's a star. Yeah. But I'm wondering if there's a little bit of selection bias here where we only remember the success stories.
The good ones.
Yeah, no, I had to think about it. But yeah, guys like Eric Fisher, you kind of every step of the process, you're nailing it, and then before long, you're like, oh yeah, why isn't this guy going top 10? Why isn't he going top 5? Why isn't he number 1? Yeah, that's possible. But yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain about somebody that showed out at the Senior Bowl, but then it was a little bit of fool's gold. Gosh, I'm going to have to think about that one.
The fact that there's no one that immediately comes to mind is probably a good sign, though. Because we have combine guys like that, like Mike Mamula and the guys that just destroyed the combine and then ended up Darius Hayward-May. Yeah, Vernon Golston.
Oh, man.
I will say that.
Remember that one?
Here's my only response to that. I went to one Michigan-Ohio State game when I was in college. A lot of my buddies went to Michigan. And I went to the game my sophomore year, which was 2007. That was the terrible Michigan season where they lost to Appalachian State after Chet Henne and Mike Hart came back. And first of all, the day was just disgusting. It was like 34 degrees and raining sideways. And this was the day I went to that game. Vernon Gholston cooked in that game. So I at least saw him be a productive college player, even if he never quite lived up to the draft status.
I think he basically became a first rounder after he played Wisconsin that year, his last year. And I want to say my really good friend, who's the line coach at San Jose State now, Josh Oglesby, he was like big time recruit. And then that was like his first start, I think. I might be throwing him under the bus, and this isn't right, but he got shredded. And I've watched that game, and it was like, I look back on it, and it's like, this is all the way after Vern's career was done. This is 5 years down the road after it. I remember just being like, oh, that's why he became a first rounder. Like half his paycheck should go to Josh.
And Jake Long was Michigan's left tackle in that game.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are a lot of reasons I thought Vernon Gholston was actually going to be pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Here it is. He had 4 tackles for 4 sacks against Wisconsin in 2007. 4 tackles, 4 sacks.
And that was that Terrell Pryor, I think, or I don't know. But think of going back to the Senior Bowl, like Daniel Jones. That might be a name where
I was thinking
because he was the MVP of the Senior Bowl. Gettleman famously said, when we saw him in Mobile, we knew right away, okay, this is our guy. And they take him all the way at 6, which felt like a reach at the time. And obviously, to this point, hasn't quite worked out. So I think that would be one of those examples where maybe a little bit of you can understand why they did it, the talent, but the tape wasn't necessarily 6 overall worthy. But during the process, you could talk yourself into it based off of what he did at the Senior Bowl and the combine and all those things.
Speaking of Duke, Nate, your first guy here in the first round is offensive lineman Graham Barton, who you have talked about a lot. What made Graham and we're gonna let you do it one more time here before the draft. What made Graham Barton one of your guys in this process?
I'm okay putting my name on this one. This isn't like Amir Smith-Marset, where it's like, I like this mid-round guy, but I talked about him so much that everyone's like, now the story is Nate Tice had a first-round grade on Amir Smith-Marset. It's like, no, it's not how this works. I do have a first-round grade. I don't have a first-round grade. I have Barton as my number 12 guy on my big board overall. And because his tape is exceptional. I really like his tape. And even if he was battling injuries this year, when I knew he was clean early in the year, this is even going into the season, I considered him neck and neck with Joe Alt. And I texted with Dane that kind of proved that. I was like, I kind of like Barton a little better. A little different now. But Barton's film is just, he's a technician. He's got great feet, great hands. And the big knock on him was, well, he's not long. He's not a good athlete. Well, he put that to bed. The length, maybe not so much. The length is still substandard. It's below 33 inches, but it's not 32 inches, what everyone thought it was.
He's not a good athlete. I mean,
people thought he wasn't a good athlete. It blew my mind.
He tested crazy.
Just like but that's what his film shows. He's a monster.
Right. It wasn't that surprising when he busted out a 4.9, and I mean, he's a good athlete. Yeah,
he's really got some edge to him too. I was watching the game he had against Jared Verse last week, and I was just like, yeah, man, this guy's got some to him. There was one play where he put Verse in the dirt, and I was like, all right, I can get on board with this.
That's a great tape too, because Verse is a guy that I was curious. Does he give him issues? Barton, I mean. Usually if you're a technician, the length and the power. Athletes, power guys give you issues. Nah, nothing. And so then he tests like that. His film's great. His hands are great. His feet are great. Why aren't we talking about this guy as a top 20 guy? Even if he's not a left tackle, which I still think he could in a pinch do that. I think he could start at 4 spots: left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. At the very least 3 spots and be a high-end starter. And I think he could be a good right tackle because his hands, because everything. There's a little Joe Tooney here. Where it's like, he could be a solid tackle, but a really good guard. But that's the thing. I think it's underrated that he could hang outside because his hands are so good, because he can keep up with better athletes, because he can recover because of his athletic ability. So Barton to me is just so clean. I've started kind of every mock kind of pushing him to the Seahawks in the middle of the first round there, because I just like the fit and like where that can match up. But I think Barton is a really clean prospect. I like where he projects. I think he could be a Pro Bowler at guard, maybe even right tackle. But I love that he could start at legit 4 spots, I think.
I was texting with a scout during his pro day a couple weeks ago, and just we're gushing back and forth how much we like the guy. And he texted back Zach Martin 2.0. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Phenomenal.
That's a name I was going to throw out, but always hesitate.
It's
when
hard.
About generational first ballot Hall of Famers.
10-time first-time All-Pro. Yeah. But same kind of discussion with Martin, right? That's exactly what was his thing. He
college
could
left tackle, right?
Could stay there maybe because of his arm, but oh my god,
right. And the versatility is a big part of why you love Riley Leonard Riley Leonard.
I do like Riley Leonard. What's
I'm looking at Duke. I'm looking at Duke, and I think Riley Leonard, who's now at Notre Dame. Why you love Barton? I mean, like he's everything you mentioned. With the athleticism, the strength in his hands, how smart he is. The coaches rave about his toughness. I mean, they say he's the hardest worker, one of the toughest guys, and it doesn't feel like coach speak. It feels like they genuinely believe that. So it's just, across the board. I don't know that maybe he might not have an A+ trait, but he's got plenty of A-, a lot of B+. Like it just doesn't have that one glaring weakness that makes you really worry about him. So he's 18 overall on my board, and if he went top 15, I don't think you wouldn't stop and say, oh, wow, that's too early for him. Like, you get it. You understand why a team would look at that and say, we could use a versatile player like that for our offensive line.
Somebody else who's in that general range on big boards, but, has been talked about as a potential surprise top 15 pick, maybe a surprise top 10 pick, is Byron Murphy from Texas, who is your other guy here in the first round, Dane. Why Byron Murphy compared to some of these other even defensive linemen or defensive prospects that you have in the first round?
Give me the guys that hate to be blocked, and I can play with those guys. And Byron Murphy despises being blocked, and it doesn't matter if we're talking the run game, we're talking him getting after the quarterback. He's so disruptive, and he does it in different ways. Now, does he look necessarily like a first-round defensive tackle? No, but I think we're past that, right? After Aaron Donald,
it feels like a 10 years ago conversation.
Right, exactly. So even though he is a little bit maybe undersized compared to ideally what you want, he moves really well. He uses that natural leverage to his advantage. He has this natural twitch through his hips and through his body that it courses power, and it's really fun to watch because he's still figuring it out. He's still figuring out how to channel all of it. But the movement skills are awesome. He's violent. He just really knows how to use his skill set to his advantage in a big, big way. So Murphy's going to be really interesting where he ends up in the first round. I think it's 8 and 18. To me, that's the range. I would not be shocked at all if he went to the Falcons at 8. I would not be shocked at all if he lasted to the Bengals at 18. I think somewhere in that range is where he should come off the board, and I think he's going to be a really disruptive pro.
How much do you think he hang cleans? It's just all that hip power and everything. Holy crap!
He was a 375 pound power clean, 455 front squat. And this goes back to high school too. I've mentioned this before, but he was a linebacker, and his sophomore year, he went to DeSoto. They put a pressure package together where he would creep up, and just rush through the A gap, and it worked so well that a week later the coaches said, "Sorry, man, you're a defensive tackle now." And he just continued adding weight, and just grew his body and did not lose that explosiveness. And his senior year at DeSoto, he broke Von Miller's sack record. So this is a guy that's been doing it for a while, not a long while in terms of being a defensive lineman, but long enough that he's been able to hone his technique and really understand how to best use that skill set to get after the quarterback. And they let him make some plays on offense at Texas. That was fun to see him do show his athleticism. I just think this is a really disruptive player that you want to see him line up as a nose tackle. You can do that. He did that quite a bit in that Texas defensive line. But I think he's more of a natural 3, but just a guy that's really disruptive.
If they don't get the quarterback, or if they can't make the move for the quarterback, Minnesota at 11 to me is very fun. If you think about some of the other pieces they've added defensively, the holes on that roster right now, you drop him in and suddenly that defensive line becomes pretty interesting. I know every Vikings fan is probably screaming right now at the idea of them not coming away with the quarterback with those first couple picks, but I do think that's a fun landing spot.
Let's get Mike Zimmer back there and have him take a corner. Let's take another corner in the first round.
With at least 32-inch arms, right?
Yeah, I texted Travis Frederick, the old Cowboys Wisconsin center, because he's the most I've ever seen someone hang clean and power clean. So I wanted to text him just to see what his number was, because that's insane. Like nearly 400 pounds power cleaning. Are you kidding? That's so much hip power and so much that you have to do. No, Murphy's a really fun player. I know Dane's loved him this entire time. I like him a lot too. He, to me, is a guy that knows what he is. And I mean that, like, like he knows what he's really good at.
Mhm.
And he knows I'm not over 300 pounds. And sometimes I got to take a double team. So he gets down on that knee and you can see his bend and you can see his fight and his strength. I think that's awesome because a lot of gap shooting types, once they get that double team, they're like, yeah, I'm good. I'll just whatever. You guys can push me. I'm good. He's like, nope, I'm straining. I'm fighting. That's awesome. So you see competitiveness along with the gap shooting stuff. So great player.
I mean, he's not 300, but he was 297 at the combine, and that's at 6'1.5". So
he was
in terms
306
of
at the pro day.
leverage,
Yeah,
he's great. He's a great player.
I think that those concerns are probably a little bit overblown. All right, Nate, your next guy in the first round. Who do you want to go with here?
Yeah, I kind of sort of said AD Mitchell, but that's not like I don't want to say fully my guy deep throated here. This is more like the if he does.
Coward.
Yeah, if he doesn't have, there's so many red flags that usually I hate receivers with, like the route running where he kind of doesn't know like exactly what he's doing, the inconsistencies there, the kind of some of the testing stuff. He's had high ankles. There's just like a lot of red flags with him. Some of the production isn't overwhelming, but have you seen him run? Have you seen him jump? Have you seen him catch? And he's got to be in a perfect spot. He does. He is not scheme proof. He's the opposite of Odunze. But the high end traits with him, almost like a May receiver version, but the high end traits are what you want. This is a true blue, could be a number one X receiver that could run a vertical route tree with no help. He could win one-on-ones and dunk on guys and run real routes. I think he's a good route runner. Even if there is some inconsistencies, I think he can move, not like a lot of tall guys can. But there are red flags, and if to ignore them would be not doing my job. So that's why this isn't fully throated. But if this dude ends up on a winning team with a real quarterback in an established place where he doesn't have to be the dude number one, Bills, Chiefs, somewhere that's ideal, of course. But if he does and he falls to that area, yeah, I'm all about him because I think they can touch and kind of maybe hone in on what he's really good at and clean him up a little bit on all the deficiencies he has.
Dane, is there anybody that was kind of in this archetype of receiver that was going to be picked maybe outside the top 15 that had flaws but had the potential to be number one, but had underwhelming college production and ended up becoming a number one in the NFL? Because even guys who fell to the second round, while Nate was talking, I looked up AJ Brown's college stats. AJ Brown had 85 catches for 1,300 yards his last 2 years at Ole Miss. So there are obviously situational elements that feed this, but production does tend to be a really good signal for success for college receivers in the NFL. So I'm wondering if there are any guys recently who maybe had slightly underwhelming production that were actually better college players than they were, or better NFL players than they were college players.
Yeah, I mean, Nico Collins.
Nico Collins is a good example.
That comes to mind.
Third rounder.
Yeah.
He's a third round pick, though. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's I know. I was looking even up T. Higgins, and he friggin' dunked on everyone for last. He had 25 touchdowns the last 2 years, so that's a bad one.
Right. Yeah. Most of the time when you're drafting a receiver in the first round, they were really productive receivers at the college level, and obviously, understandably, why. But yeah, that's I'm trying to.
I was looking at Ayuk too. Ayuk only had 65 catches last year at Arizona State, but he had 1,200 yards. And so even Ayuk, So and Ayuk's in that same range, right? Like where it wasn't a plug and play. You can be a number one. There's probably a little bit of projection involved here, but even he almost had 1,200 yards his final year in college.
That's a great point.
So it's interesting because I'm with Dane. I'm with Nate. Like I watch him play. And if I'm thinking about, all right, I need a number one 2 years from now which guys from this range can eventually get there? When you watch the tools he has and just what's in the tool bag, I think that is on the table for him. But I understand some of the nerds looking at the college production and just being like, I'm not doing this because there aren't a lot of examples that would lead you to believe a guy with this sort of profile is going to be a star in the NFL. He would be an exception.
But with Mitchell, comparing his floor with his ceiling is a really interesting conversation because I think it's a big range.
Yeah.
His ceiling to me is I compared him to the late Chris Henry. That long, loose, limber, really athletic player that can win down the field. He just moves a little bit differently than guys that size. But I think his floor is kind of like a Denzel Mims, a guy that clearly has ability. It's not a talent issue. It's just a matter of consistency and living up to that immense talent, which Mims just had never has never been able to do at the NFL level. So it's just a wide range of outcomes for Mitchell based off of where he goes and the situation that he's in, and obviously it's on him to try to maximize that.
My only response to that is that Mims couldn't separate even in college. And that when these guys end up being just like their careers are DOA in the NFL, Mims, N'Keal Henry, a lot of those guys who are those bigger bodied players, they weren't separators even in college. With Mitchell, you see some of the separation ability. So that's why it becomes a little bit more intriguing to me than some of these other guys, no offense to Nate, who Nate loved in college and didn't end up becoming stars in the NFL because they were just big bodied guys who weren't separators.
I like Higgins Treadwell too, right? So
did not like Treadwell.
We've all got him. We've all got him.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Is like I was high on Higgins in the same draft. I was high on Mims. So it's like, one worked, one didn't. Like that's a little bit of difference. There are traits from those that like Higgins is like one. It's like, why did he click? And it's like there's certain aspects of his ball skills too that were like, I think it's like so much more just that feel, the really grabbing that rebound. Where Mims, it was always like by the sideline, he's falling down as he's catching the ball and all that. And I was like, yeah, but look at him run. And
that's it.
You learn a little bit.
The production conversation with receivers is so interesting because I remember going through so many debates on Twitter with N'Keal Henry or N'Keal Harry, who I did not love. I did not see him as a first round pick. He can't separate. But look at this production. And that's what, look what he did at Arizona State. I kept getting those responses to it. And so the production element is definitely, we've seen plenty of productive college receivers that have not been able to pan out, even if they did have some skills. And N'Keal definitely stands out as one of those guys.
All right, let's get to the guys that are probably going to be going on day 2 here, or at least are projected to be day 2 picks. Dane, why don't you start us off with somebody that you think actually might sneak into the first round as one of your guys in this range?
Yeah, I think if we're going to, because every year we know the 27, 28 names. If we are trying to guess who those final 5, 6 names are going to be in the first round, who are going to be the surprises, Marshawn Kneeland from Western Michigan, I would not be surprised if he was able to sneak in there because he plays the right position. First and foremost, he's a pass rusher. Every team is looking for more help there. 6'3", 267 pounds. He's a really athletic big man for that size. He ran in the 4.7s, 35.5-inch vert. 7.02 3-cone is silly at that size, 34.5-inch arms. You see the body twitch that he plays with, and again, it's just different. And I think seeing that at the combine kind of reinforced my thoughts there, where it's okay, he's a little bit different than the guy before him, a little bit different than the guy after him, in just terms of movement, in terms of that initial quickness. He understands leverage at the point of attack. He shows different moves. It's not just I've got this a pitch and then everything else is a work in progress. He will use these different things to get free from blocks. He can hold up versus the run. So a lot of things that Marshawn Kneeland brings to the table. I mean, he's still a work in progress in some areas, but all the tools that he brings, those are the guys I want to bet on. So he's going to go in the top 50 somewhere. It's just a matter of, okay, can he get into the top 32, which would not be surprising to me.
What are our character evaluations of him? I ask for a very specific reason.
I mean, I've heard nothing but good things in terms of effort, in terms of, he was a team captain his final season at Western Michigan. He actually almost went to Colorado and joined Deion Sanders, and at the last minute, because they had a coaching change at Western Michigan, at the last minute, he decided to stay home and be with his teammates. But no issues there in terms of character. So
the reason that I ask is, what about Detroit at 29?
Trust me, I've had this conversation with Colton. And actually, that's if they do trade back, I think that's something that would be a fit. He was a 30 visit for the Lions. Yeah. They've done a lot of work on him. So if they don't pull the trigger there at 29, which I almost did, my 7-round mock came out today. I almost did it, but I had Detroit trading out because I had the Raiders. And if I didn't have them trading out, I probably would have done it at Neyland at 29 to Detroit. I had the Raiders trading up to take Michael Penix with the Lions pick there. But yeah, I think it makes sense. It checks a lot of boxes for a lot of reasons. And the Lions have been very upfront that their board looks very different than everybody else's. And all the evidence you need is in the first 2 rounds last year with how they operated. They took, take the linebacker in the first round when I don't think a lot of teams would have done that. So I think their board looks a lot different. And if Neyland is a top top player for them in terms of their options late in the first round, that shouldn't be surprising to anybody.
You look at the edges, there's just not a lot of those base 4-3 DNs, those old school base. Like he reminds
me. And they
me,
value size at those spots. If you look at what they've done, Kaminsky, Marcus Davenport, I mean, they like those 265, 270 type guys there.
Shoot even bigger. Yeah, Kneeland, he is a fun player. It's he reminds me a lot. Weird because we just talked about his brother or his cousin, but William Golston for the Bucks. But he tested better as a better athlete.
More explosive because William Golston's a solid player, but not a good athlete. Right. Yeah,
Kneeland's a better athlete, but that same type of size, same type of length, how they win, pushing the pocket a little bit. But yeah, I like Kneeland. I see him like being a good pro. I know Dane's been beating his drum a little bit. Got my hands on some more Western Michigan games, and he's got length, size, strength, and he uses it. He uses it well. And
watch the Eastern Michigan tape. That's the tape where it was like, okay, I'm sold. This is the guy.
Was like he had like 3 plays in a row. Like the Eastern Michigan was like backed up, and he took over the game. And it was just it's not always the sexiest thing, but he's dominating, and that's what you want to see at that level. So, but no, certain teams are going to really like him because he's a different flavor than those top edges too. I mean, you got a lot more of the traditional outside linebacker type at edge as opposed to a 4-3 D end.
And even if the production's not there, he had 4.5 sacks last year. The testing is insane.
Yeah.
And I would rather bet on a guy with those tools. It's a little bit raw, especially in that area of the draft. And with Detroit specifically, it's just hard for me to get out of my mind dropping one more super athlete onto that defensive line.
I love
with DJ Reader now. I could see it all coming together. In
him
a
and Hutchinson pair so well together. So I would love that for them.
Nate, who's your first guy here in day 2 on one of your guys in this year's draft?
I'll bring up some of the other guys I'm going to bring up are guys we've already talked about because I can't help myself. But another one that I do want to harp on here is Christian Haynes from University of Connecticut, UConn.
You love Christian Haynes.
I love Christian Haynes. I have him in my 30s on my big board. my comparison for him is
30. Up 30. He's number 30.
Is he 30 now?
Yes.
I'm trying to. The one thing he can't do, but he struggles with is some bull rush anchoring. Like he will get blown back a little bit, but then you get to see his athleticism in the same sentence, in the same play, because you can see his bend and you see his length and all those types of things, his ability to recover, which is more important than anything. But the thing with Haynes is he cuts off guys on zone, which is so hard to do. And he doesn't just do it once a game. He does it every single time. He looks like a great athlete. You see the athleticism testing that he had this offseason. It shows up with his film. I think he's very smart. He's got great eyes, great awareness. He started a lot of games. He reminds me a lot of Shaq Mason.
4-year starter. He started like 50 games in college. I mean, it's such an outlier compared to other offensive line prospects, specifically in this class, who are more project-y and more inexperienced compared to a guy like this.
And he didn't move on to a bigger school this year, where you might see that, so he kind of gets a little undersold. And at first, when I first glanced at him, I was like, okay, you're probably like a round 3 guy to me. And then he tested like how he plays. So again, that's what kind of kept growing it for me because of the movement ability, because of what he does in the run game, him climbing to the second level. It's consistent. It's every play. So I feel like he's a day 1 starter for somebody. He's somewhere between, like I said, Shaq Mason and maybe Laken Tomlinson, some kind of mix of those two. I don't know exactly where I'm going with there, but
I threw out Kevin Dotson.
Kevin Dotson's another a good one too. I thought zone guys would really like him because of his movement ability, but there's other stuff he can do as a puller that makes me excited. Him out in space on screens. Yeah, Haynes, I just see as a day 1 starter for somebody. He's got he's only played right guard, but he worked at center a little bit, which makes me a little even more warm on him, that he has some interior versatility. He's a great athlete. Yeah, I'm really high on him, and I think some team could really find a good starter on day 2.
Dane, why are you relatively a little bit lower than Nate is on him specifically?
I mean, he's my 47 overall player, so
okay.
I
couldn't remember where he was on your big board, so that still is pretty rich.
It is, because he's crushed the process. He was outstanding at the Senior Bowl, and then at the Combine, he was terrific. Another guy where when you see him move in person, it's like, okay, this confirms what I thought, and maybe I was even a little bit too low on him based just on the tape grade, because he has the movements to him that's how NFL starters move. So, I don't know that it's always consistent. Sometimes I watch the tape and the athletic testing didn't always show up, but I think he's really smart. I think that he always finishes. I mean, the guy is really competitive, and it's not nothing, but when you're playing no disrespect to UConn, but you've been playing on some bad teams, and when you're still finishing in the fourth quarter, that stands out. That matters. When the game's put away, you're not winning this one. You've just, you're blocking for a running back that's getting you 2 yards, but you're still finishing, and that matters. And something that I thought really stood out on Haynes' tape.
There's a size comparison someone had to Chris Snee with Haynes.
Okay,
and I was like, oh. Yeah, like that was a pretty good one. A little shorter.
I haven't heard in a long
blast
time.
from the past.
Yeah.
I worked with his
college
brother,
wrestler Chris Snee, right?
Yeah,
was that the whole big thing with Chris Snee back in the day? All right, Dane, let's get to your next one here. You want to talk about Andru Phillips, the cornerback from Kentucky. You have him at 61 on your board. He's at 89 on the consensus big board. That is a pretty big gap. So he is decidedly one of your guys. What do you like about Andru Phillips from Kentucky?
And honestly, I'm kicking myself. I feel like a coward. I should have had him higher. To me, this guy.
There's still time, my friend. There's still time. We got a week to go.
Once the draft guide's out, that's it. I can't.
Right, you're done.
No, that's it. But look, I usually struggle with these guys because he doesn't have size. He's 5'10" and 3/4, 190 pounds. So not, it's very small, but still doesn't have ideal size for what you're looking for at the corner position. And he doesn't have ball production. That usually with those two things, I'm
all right. I'm a little bit worried now, right? So talk me into this then.
It's like me and AD Mitchell. It's like he has this red flag, he has this red flag. I still like him.
I am all the way in on Andru Phillips because he competes his butt off, and when you watch him, he's always in phase. He's not all over the place. He doesn't show a lot of panic. I think it was, and I liked his tape going into the Senior Bowl, but then watching him during practice at the Senior Bowl, that's what really clicked for me. Like, okay, this guy, he's all over this receiver. The receiver can't do anything. He is a blanket. I think he has a really good sense for just playing the position, and he needs to get better in terms of finding the football, making a play on it, but he doesn't give up a lot of catches. He does not allow, even though he's not the biggest guy, he doesn't allow receivers to big brother him. He's in position, and he's just a very savvy player. So again, even though he's falling short in a few of these areas where you wish they were a little bit different, lower body quickness, the just know-how, the understanding of how to play the position, it's a football IQ type of thing. I think those athletic instincts and the way he plays is going to translate really well, probably as a nickel. I think the comparison's Roger McCreary. And I stole that from an NFL scout, and I know he's listening, so I apologize.
Yeah.
But Roger McCreary is Roger McCreary was an early second-round pick, had a lot of these same concerns. Smaller, really short-armed. Now he had better ball production at Auburn, but I think that when you line these guys up, I think there's a lot of similarities that will translate well to the NFL.
That's a great comp. Yeah. You think Phillips can hang on the outside a little bit? Like I get. What
I think he can. Yeah. I mean, because again, I think he didn't let any receivers in the SEC big brother him. I mean, it doesn't matter if he's facing a 6'4"
wiry
guy.
Strong.
Yeah, he is right, and I think there's that compete level. It matches the play strength, where even though he doesn't necessarily pass the eye test, just looking at him, he plays tough, he acts tough, and it does translate, I think, to what he can do on the football field.
There's like 4 corners that's like I feel like I have the same ups and downs with all of them. Rakestraw. Like all these guys where it's like the traits aren't there, some of the production's there. Yeah, and it's just like, but I still like them because it's just like they just do stuff. Like, there's like 4 of those guys that I'm kind of in the same boat. I've got back and forth.
Has extremely long arms compared to Roger McCreary. I didn't really. You look back, Roger McCreary has 28 7/8 inches arms.
He's a weird player.
0 percentile arm length.
I remember where I was.
5'11".
5'11".
Yeah, about 5'11 and a half.
I can remember where I was in Mobile when I saw where his arms measured that short, and I was like, oh no, because you like the player, but you just never see corners with arm length that short. And I was shocked that he went as early as he did. He was an early second-round pick, but he has played. He's played well. He's
to a team that
held his own.
Nice solid start. To a team that loves straights, the Titans.
Andru Phillips, he's going to go in the second round. He's not going to make it to the third round. I'll be surprised if he does. In my mock, I had him going to the 49ers in that late second round. I think that's kind of his floor if you last that long, but he might not last that long.
And even if you like him because he's tough and you like the play style, it's still solid measurements across the board. He had a 42-inch vertical jump at the combine. I mean, that is an explosion.
Under 7 seconds in the 3-cone. Like you said, the arm length is 31.25-inch arms, which is not it's longer than you would think for his body type. So yeah, I think a lot of things, even if he doesn't have the size or the height that you want, or the interception numbers, he's just a player, and he makes plays. And I know that a lot of people, that scares them when they don't hit certain data points, but I don't know. I was seduced by the tape.
I know. I can't pull the trigger on him. I know you love him, and I kept him in my 90s. I didn't think he made my top 100 in my last one, but right now I'm updated. He's like 96, and it's just, he's just a good football player. It's just one of those. Yeah, I don't know. It's like all these guys. What was the other DB that I was going to say? Not just Rakestraw, but there's a few of these guys. Oh, from Michigan. Sanderstill. Another kind of like, not everything is like overwhelming, but he's just a baller, and he's just like he's just a good football player, but has some traits, just not the ideal size, not ideal length. Everything, they're missing some things, even if I like the football player in them.
I almost picked Sanderstill for this category because he's number 43 for me. I'm really high on Sanderstill. Really so again, usually corners, these undersized guys, they worry me, but Sanderstill and Phillips, they're just football players. At the end of the day, give me the good football players, and that's what these two guys are.
Yeah. Nate, there was another guy in day 2 at corner that you wanted to talk about as one of your guys, and that's TJ Tampa from Iowa State. Why TJ Tampa for you among all those corners who feel kind of clustered in that range?
He's a little different than these guys, where he does have the size and does have some real grit to him, some bigness to him. Tampa is just a good football player. I don't know what I like about him. I see some man coverage ability. I like him in zone. Like, maybe it's just like what Iowa State does. I'm like, this translates easily. It's like quarterbacks watching a guy do quick game. You're like, oh, I can translate that. It's
a lot of off coverage and just like awareness in zone, right? It's stuff that you're going to have to do.
His spatial awareness, I really like, with his size. And that's the combo that I keep coming back to. This guy understands the position, understands football. He has intelligence to him, and he has size and enough athleticism. He didn't test overwhelming, but there's just a role for this guy somewhere. And I don't know what it is exactly. And that's why I like him. I actually talked to Deontay about him a little bit, and we came to the same conclusion. It's like, is he a Patriots guy? Like, is he that type where he's this kind of weird body and not overwhelming in some areas? And like, that is it a Flores guy where you move him around, he could do some man stuff, does some zone stuff, just has high IQ to get underneath other areas. So I just kept coming back to Tampa. I originally thought, oh yeah, he's just only going to be for certain systems, but I like him for more fits than I originally did, because of the size, because of the IQ, and just enough athleticism where I don't think he'll be overwhelmed at the NFL level.
I think this is the guy you guys are closest on, because Nate, you had him at 56, TJ Tampa on your big board. Dane, you had Tampa at 55 on your big board. So you guys are almost in lockstep with where you see him.
Yeah, we nailed Chop Robinson, right? That was the one we had. I think we're both at like the same spot. I think that was one guy. We did it.
Tampa's tough because he's a 4.58 guy. That's what he ran at the Big 12 Pro Day. And he declined a Senior Bowl invitation. He said I'm good, and I thought he could have helped himself. I thought that was a mistake. I thought that was an opportunity for him to really show out and show what he can do. I was also surprised he didn't jump during the pre-draft process, because that's kind of like his thing. That's what he does. Yeah. He comes from a basketball family. I thought he'd easily got over 40, but he decided not to jump. And maybe there's I know there was a hamstring issue that he was battling through. Maybe that played a factor into he didn't want to jump 38 because he knows he could do. What's that?
A lot of hamstrings on these pro days, Dane. Is there something going on here?
quote unquote hamstrings. Right.
Wow, we can't. Exactly. Is that an injury we can't test?
I know.
Yeah. Okay. It's all about feel and how you feel with it. Oh wow.
I still love Cooper DeJean, but no 3-cone, no short shuttle for Cooper. We know he's fast.
And he can jump.
Yeah, reinforce that. But some of the stickiness at the top of routes, I don't know. But look, Tampa's opinions are all over the place on him. Some teams are they believe he's an early second round guy. Other teams believe he's more of a mid third round guy. So I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right where we are with how we rank him. But it wouldn't be a surprise if he ends up going maybe earlier or later than even we have him.
Dan, you mentioned Mike Sanderstill as a guy that you liked. I sense a creeping Michigan defense love here, because the next guy that you wanted to talk about is Junior Colson, the linebacker from Michigan, your last guy on day 2 that you're excited about. Why Junior Colson from Michigan on this list?
Yeah, and I mean, who knows? He might even sneak in. If we're talking those sneaky guys that could go earlier than we think, maybe sneak into round one. Colson it's not impossible because he is, I think, the clear linebacker one in a weak linebacker class. And so if you want to come away from this draft with a standout guy in the middle, you want the green dot guy who has athleticism, has physicality, has toughness, Junior Colson is, I think, easily the top guy this year. And I question whether or not he's going to get past 37 with Harbaugh and the Chargers at that point. This is the guy
they had him and Chris Jenkins in like the same day last week. It's very funny to me. Just Michigan reunion down there in Los Angeles.
Right. I think that's a perfect example of how teams don't always use all their 30 visits. Like, we can get a little too obsessive over this. They know everything they need to know about Chris Jenkins and Junior Colson. But hey, guys, come hang out. Let's go. Obviously,
you want a free trip to LA? Yeah,
exactly. So I think between those two players, it could be interesting. And I'd throw Sainris still in there as well. It feels like one of those three guys are going to be the pick at 37 to the Chargers. Which child do you like the best, Coach Harbaugh? I don't know. But Colson, he might not even be there at that point because I think, again, the fact that he is not the total. I mean, I do think he's a total package. He might not have overwhelming traits in some of these areas, but he doesn't have a weak area either. And I think, his story is awesome, obviously, growing up in Haiti and then, he grew up in an orphanage, didn't come here until, he was 9 years old. He didn't know English. Football was kind of his, the way he became a U.S. citizen, and he understood the culture and learned the language and understood social relationships, and it was all through football. And so he has a special relationship with it, and he's a tough guy. Down the stretch, the final month of the season, he's playing with 2 broken hands. He didn't miss a game, and so I think with what he can do in the run game with his range. He is the total package, and because of that, I think a lot of these teams are going to be interested because he's a good player, but then also because, like I said, it's not a great linebacker class this year.
He's both of our linebacker ones. Just everything Dane said. He checks all the boxes, even if none of them are overwhelming. This guy can play all 3 downs. Junior Colson. He can play in coverage. He can play man to man with a back if he has to. He can play in zone. He's also so smart. And that's not me interviewing him, nothing. That is just me watching him on film, calling stuff out. I don't know if there's signal stealing going on, but calling stuff out but you can see it when our first Junior Colson conversation was during the college football playoff day. And I think both of us we're excited to rave about him because you're like, he was everywhere. Like we just talked about him for 10 minutes. And since then he's been my linebacker one. Really that solidified it for me because there's not, like Dane said, it's not a great linebacker class. This guy can play 3 downs. He can play the run. He's smart. He's got enough length. He's got enough athleticism. Again, not overwhelming, but enough that
and there's no testing for him. And that's kind of why some are maybe a little hesitant because there's no testing. Again, a hamstring issue. So we don't have official testing on him, right? But you don't watch him and say this is a bad athlete. No. He might not be a 4.3 guy, a 4.4 guy, but I think you watch him and I think the number one takeaway from his film, you just don't see a lot of mental mistakes. Yep. He plays smart football. He's where he needs to be. So again, he might not, I don't know if he'll ever make a Pro Bowl, but I think he's just going to be a rock solid starter for a long time.
The comparison I keep coming back is Nick Bolton, just a version of that. Just solid starter, can do a lot of things well, even if he's not overwhelming. And he's bigger than Bolton.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
I went with a more complete version of Derek Barnes at the Lions, because size-wise, toughness-wise, I think it matches up. He's just a more complete version of that.
You have a couple more guys here, Nate, but guys we've talked a lot about, whether it's Mike Hall from Ohio State, Jalen Polk, who you love. I saw Jalen Polk snuck into Peter Schrager's first-round mock draft, which has to be fun for you. That could be a great moment on draft night if that somehow happens. You get your super useful Jalen Polk in the first round.
Yeah, that was surprising even for me. I was like, I'm high. I have him in the 30s in my big board, and I know that's high. And I was like, first round, here we go. Let's go. Not the only one.
Those are my favorite moments for our draft shows, is the late first surprises that for one reason or another you guys get pumped about. Cole Strange remains one of the best moments of our draft shows that we've done so far. So I'm hoping we get a Marshawn Kneeland or a Jalen Polk, one of these guys who are day 2 our guys, but somehow sneak into the first. Let's get to the other end of the spectrum here and talk about some guys who are outside of the top 100 on some of these consensus boards. Dane, why don't you kick us off? Who is your first guy outside of the top 100 that you wanted to talk about?
I'm going to go with Tyrone Tracy from Purdue, a former receiver at Iowa, which, that worked out the way it sounds. It didn't work out. So he transfers to Purdue, and they actually moved him to running back this past year. So he's had a grand total of 1 year at running back, and he was a lot of fun. He also returned kicks. He had a 98-yard touchdown. But he kind of reminds me of, like in basketball, he would be that high energy sixth man who can swing games when he catches fire. Tracy's that type of guy, type of weapon where you want him part of your backfield rotation. He can rip off an explosive play or 2 or 3 each game and make something happen. And a big part of that is his ability out of the backfield catching the football. And you see that receiver background. The decision making at the line of scrimmage as a running back is up and down. That's it. You can tell he's a former wide receiver. But again, we're talking about day 3, 4th round, 5th round. You add this guy to your running back mix, and I think you got an explosive option. Just get the ball in his hands and let him cook. He tore up the combine. I was as happy as I was to see that. I was also disappointed because, all right, the secret's out on Tracy now because this 40-inch vert. He was in the 4.4s and the 40s, 6'8", 1.3 cone, and this is at 210 pounds. So it's like, all right, it's not much of a secret at this point, but I'm sure there were definitely some teams who didn't want to see that either because they were all over Tracy and what he could be.
When I saw those numbers, because I was not familiar with Tyrone Tracy's testing before you sent that name over and I started looking at it this morning, my eyes popped out of my head. I was like, oh my God, that's insane. The first name that comes to mind, and I don't know size-wise, it's a little bit smaller, but a guy who didn't have a lot of experience at running back, but tested like crazy like this and where he went in the draft, Jerick McKinnon was one of the first names I thought about, where it's just like an insane athlete at the running back position, but didn't play a lot of running back in college. So it's kind of like, all right, what are we going to get?
Yeah. Fun.
That makes sense. Yeah. A guy that's never going to be your true running back, a featured back, but you add him to the mix, and especially with what he can do out of the backfield, just get the ball in his hands, let him create, let him do some things, and every game he's going to make some type of impact for you.
I'm a sucker for the receiver to running back guys. David Johnson, Rashad White, like I just those guys always intrigue me.
You so are.
I am. There's some about it because it's just I don't know. Dane, I actually wanted to ask you this: have teams talked about kick returning or like weighing that a little bit more, like
great
kick return ability with the change? Because I've started really like going like, hey, I'm going to give this guy maybe a half grade bump because of that. It used to just be I only worried if they punt return, not kick return. Now we're bringing that back. So when you talk to teams, have they kind of been bringing that up a little bit?
100%. That's why I mentioned the 98-yard kick return he had this year. That's why a guy like Isaac Garendo from Louisville, who has special teams background and tested off the charts, even though he was he did nothing at Wisconsin, and then this past year at Louisville, he did some nice things, but still, it's an underwhelming resume. But when you have that type of athletic profile and you have special teams experience, that's going to bump you up a little bit. The top kick returner among the receivers is probably Tulu Griffin or Aeneas Smith, the Texas A&M kid. Yeah. So, I think those names, if we see one of those names go maybe a little bit earlier than we expect on draft weekend, kick return, I think, is a big part of it.
Because it's just the math changing with these guys that we think of as selective touch guys, 3 to 5. Now we're doubling that. Yep. And so those matter. Those are real snaps. They're not just waving their hand or pulling their arms out to get the touchback now. It's like, no, these guys are tangible snaps. So I've been curious.
I love that. I love that it matters again. I love that
we're going to talk about it
again as we evaluate players.
I can't wait to break down
back into the game.
Kickoff return scheme, because remembering it from XFL, it was cool to watch it week in, week out, because you could see the coaches start figuring it out. And then COVID happened. But it was awesome to watch it start evolving. So I'm excited what see NFL special team coaches do and what players start to get valued more. Like we're going to get some tight ends, some tweener guys that are going to have roles again. I'm really excited.
Listen to Dan Campbell. I think it was at the owners meetings and they were asking him about it, just licking his chops about the strategy that's now going to go into kickoffs was the least surprising response to that rule change that you could possibly imagine. Nate, who is your first guy, one of your guys outside of the top 100 consensus in this draft?
Outside of top 100, and it's my safety one. And again, this is a guy Dane tipped me off on. He goes, "You're going to like this guy." Not only that I liked him, I loved him. That's Malik Mustapha from Wake Forest. A little bit undersized height-wise, but it has some good girth to him. I've compared
Not
him
girth,
to girth.
We've reached this point in the pre-draft process.
Yes, we have. But watching him, he's kind of a Diet Coke version of Budda Baker, where he is that rover type. He's the best tackling DB in this class, and I will argue about anybody on that one. This guy brings guys down, and not just big hits. He's a sound tackler. He is a true safety, cleaning stuff up on the back end, but also comes down. Watch him against Florida State. He has one of my favorite plays by any prospect in this class, coming from depth and wiping out the running back on a key short yardage play. But that is what I like about him. I was a little scared that he'd be a Carl Joseph type, who I've experienced with them with the Raiders, undersized head hunting center or safety, but can't cover anyone. you got to be able to cover. You can't just, it's not 1992. Mustapha is better in coverage than I think he's kind of getting credit for. He is a little more fluid in it. I saw some man coverage reps where he's staying with tight ends, which is what he's going to do in the NFL. Saw him working the slot and space, and he's pretty good. He can recover on angles. He's not just a big or undersized stiff that's just knocking guys out. So yeah, I have this guy as my safety one. I think I have a late second, early third on him. I'm not saying this guy should go super high, but I just like him because I think he covers better than he's gotten credit for. He's great against the run. He's a great tackler. Put him in a quarters defense that everyone runs now. Really like him because that's what he's going to be asked to do as opposed to being all over the place like he had to in college. So yeah. Really, really high on him.
He's a good player. He's easy to like, right? I mean, it's just he finished 85 overall for me. The one reason I couldn't get any higher was just the lack of, like, I agree with you. I think he's better in coverage than he gets credit. I just don't know that he's a playmaker in coverage. Mm-hmm. And that totally was like the one hesitation that I have with him. But I think, he's at his best working high to low. I mean, his speed working downhill is awesome. He's a really sound tackler, like you said. And a fun story too. He started at Richmond. He kind of paved the way for Kobe Turner, who also made that Richmond to Wake Forest move a year after
spider jump.
Malik Mustapha did. Yeah. I compared him to Jordan Whitehead, a guy that
love that.
Is a quarters based thing. I had that in my mind as Nate was saying that because your Whitehead comparison,
right? Yeah. And a guy that's he can line them up in different ways, but it's always going to come down to. He's not going to make a lot of mental mistakes. He's not going to create penalties. He's not going to put you in a bind. He's going to do his job. He's going to, once he sees ball, he's going to go get ball, and he's going to go make plays. So I'm with you. The size, not ideal, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily a huge deterrent for him in the NFL.
Curious, Dane, you also mentioned Budda Baker in your write-up of him in The Beast, that he modeled his game after Budda Baker. Is that something you heard or something that was actually said to you, or just stylistically it reminded you of Budda Baker?
I think he told me that.
Okay, that's really funny. That's what Nate
he plays like.
Yeah.
He plays just like him.
I enjoy talking to him, and I talked to his mom as well, and they're just good people, good family. He is all ball all the time, and so he's the type of person you want to draft on your football team.
Dane, let's get to your next one here. Your next guy in this draft outside of the top 100. Who do you got for me?
Well, I know Nate's going to talk about some tight ends. I want to get one of my tight ends in here. Tip Reiman. This guy's interesting. He's 6'5", 270, so he's huge. And then you look at the way he tests, and you're like, oh, this is a typo. I must have looked at the wrong row when I put these workout numbers in here. No, he's 4.64 in the 40, 33.5-inch vert, 702 3-cone at that size. And it's like, okay, he didn't work out at his pro day. Well, no kidding. He ripped up the combine. Look at this. Jeez. And he was awesome to talk to because he is like, he's married already. He is a really mature 22 years old. He's wired differently. It's really interesting. And you look at the resume in terms of just production, and it's not going to blow you away. 19 catches this year.
Each of the past 2 years.
Yeah, 41 in his career. Okay, we're not talking about a high volume type of receiver here, but he did what was asked of him. And so when he was targeted, he caught the football. He didn't have a drop this year. And I think there's more in him than what the stat sheet says, than even what the tape says, because I do think that he can be an impact blocker. I do think that, especially once you get down to the red zone, once you get inside the 30, he can help you move the chains and some of those, when the field condenses, because he has just enough athleticism, he has just enough toughness. So Tip Reiman, if the asking price is a second-round pick, then I'm out. But if the asking price is a fourth or fifth rounder, I like my chances at that point as a guy I can bring in, develop, and I was talking to one of my scout buddies about him, and he during the season he was praying that he would be a guy that they could sign after the draft, and after the combine he said no way. He's going to get drafted. It's too many teams like him for what he could be, and I'm on board. I'm a big fan of his.
He's fun.
Typically these bigger tight ends, 270 plus, they've been bad bets in the draft recently just because they're not good enough athletes to make it work. But because he's such a good athlete, I think that he might be one of those exceptions for somebody at that size. And just to throw something out, 38 catches his final 2 years in college. Dane, how many catches do you think George Kittle had combined his final 2 years of college?
Is it over under 38?
It's over 38, but by 4. 42 combined catches for George Kittle's final 2 years in college. So sub 50 receptions, 5th round.
There you go.
Yeah. So sub 50 receptions is not necessarily a disqualifier to being a productive NFL tight end, even if
Big Ten can produce some. Big Ten can produce some tight ends. Yeah.
It's the tight end theory for me. It's just once you get in these middle rounds, just draft the big fast athletes and hope it works out. That's it.
Well,
that's
funny
really
you say that. Because your next guy here, outside of the top 100 on the consensus, is a tight end who is the big fast guy.
Yeah.
Who you got for me?
And that's why I'm glad we did the consensus, because I wouldn't be able to throw this guy in there because he is 50 on my big board. And that's Theo Johnson.
And he's 80th on Dane's big board.
Yeah.
So
He's not in the consensus? That's surprising.
No,
Jeez.
Totally odd. That's why I had him as a day 2 guy to talk about. And then I looked at the consensus. I go, whoop, we're moving to the outside top 100. Theo Johnson, big, fast athlete. Bet on him. That's what it is. Penn State, yes. And also that's a Penn State thing. Penn State guys tend to get better in the NFL because whatever reason, they don't really get coached up there.
They spend a shitload of time in the weight room, man. I can tell you that much right now.
Yeah, they do. That's speed training. If who's a strength coach I want to talk to. But Johnson it's flashes with him in his in-game tape. It's just, 1 or 2 catches a game, but you see the movement ability. He's a natural mover for such a big body, 6'6", 260 pounds, I believe, off the top of my head. And he can roll, and you can see it on film, and he's got natural hands. He's a natural ball catcher. That ball sticks when he gets thrown the ball. Wasn't a lot, but it happened. The thing is why I like him is all that movement stuff, all that size. He has potential as an inline wide tight end, which is hard to find. That's why I agree with Dane where Tip Reiman has, should have fans, because there's not a lot of guys that can do what he can do or potentially do that. What's cool with Johnson is usually with these big athletic tight ends in college, it's all projection with their blocking. You're like, yeah, okay, maybe he hasn't worked on. With Theo Johnson, he's actually doing it and actually blocking well when he had to be in line. They have another tight end there, so it'll be alternating between who was the wing and who was a tight end. I believe he's pretty highly touted as well, Dane.
Warren, number 44, yeah.
Yeah, he can move too. I just kept coming back to Johnson, and it's just all these flashes. He goes to the Senior Bowl. Has the combine, has a great day at the combine, of course.
He was great at the Senior Bowl.
And he was great at the Senior Bowl as well. Yeah, I just didn't want to cross my wires there. But he goes there, and it's just like, again, you're watching all this inline stuff. You're watching him move. You're watching the natural hands. Is he going to be that number 1, even number 2 option in passing tech? No. But as an auxiliary option where, he catches a couple balls, he's going to be reliable. He can stretch the seam, stretch vertically, which I think is very important if he's going to play on all 3 downs. So this is a 3-down tight end that can play in line that I think can split out just enough to create some matchup stuff. I'm willing to bet on a guy like this, especially coming from his school. This is not a guy coming from I'll just hype my own guys up, but old Wisconsin, where you're like, yeah, they're kind of maxed out. They're coached up all the way they can be. A guy from Penn State, yeah, I'm betting his best balls in front of him, because especially such a young athlete like this.
You want to make it more complicated than just pick the biggest, fastest athlete at tight end. If you look at recent history, it's not that much more complicated than that. Especially when you get to a certain round of the draft. It's like, who cares? Just pick the guy who's big and fast, and let's see if we can figure it out later. And he's really big and really fast. He had a 40-inch vertical leap at 6'6", 250.
It's crazy that he did not have better than 350 yards receiving in any of his 4 seasons in college. How does that happen when you have this type of weapon at your disposal and you can't get him better than 350 yards receiving in any of these seasons? I don't. I mean,
and all his catches, none are designed for him. It's all like where he's a check down, he catches and runs with it. It's like, design something for this guy.
Are we at all worried about that, or do you just think that's malpractice?
Malpractice, because what I see what that offense does.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably 80-20 malpractice, but there are parts of his game where he is maybe a little bit a work in progress in terms of the timing and making himself available, things like that. But it's not really excusable, where, especially when Penn State, it's not like they lit it up with their receivers. I mean, I know Jahan Dotson was a first-round pick a couple years ago, but the last 2 years, and the quarterback play has played a part in this, especially this past year in 2023. The quarterback play was really bad, below average, and that plays a part. But yeah, this is a play. If he won't get out of day 2. He will be a day 2 pick. I'd be very surprised if he did.
He can't. Brent Strange went around 2, and he's from the same school. He's way better, better. Oh yeah, there's no chance. But,
you want to hit these other tight ends here, Nate? I'll just a couple others that you liked that you wanted to mention outside of the top 100.
I'll just kind of complete other guys that they're all in my top 100, but they're outside the consensus. And that's Jared Wiley from TCU, who I think made your top 100, Dane. As well.
Yeah, he was
89.
Somewhere in
89. Okay. And Wiley is more of a receiving only tight end. I've seen comparisons to Mike Gesicki. I think Wiley's much tougher, much better blocker, much more of a fluid athlete than Gesicki. Gesicki was explosive. Wiley is a true runner and splitter and a good route runner with good hands, great size. You don't see a lot of 6'6" guys that can move like this. Again, another guy I have in my top 100, big, fast athlete that actually has tangible film. And he's not a great blocker, but he's willing to scrap, and he's not soft in that area. So another guy that's an intriguing package that I'd be willing to bet on. The last one is AJ.
Quarterback. So
quarterback.
Made that transition to tight end. He was throwing passes to Quinyon Mitchell in Temple, Texas, back in the day. Yeah, so they were teammates together, quarterback, receiver, and then he made the transition to tight end when he went to Texas, and then before he transferred to TCU.
It's a different than my dad's transition from quarterback to tight end, or Blake Bell. Like Blake Bell was just the belldozer. Wiley can roll. Like he is a good athlete. I mean, he tested
4.62 at 250, not bad.
And it shows up on film. It's not just pure projection. And then the last guy I'll throw out here, the last tight end, is AJ Barner from Michigan. I understand why he's outside the top 100, even if I snuck him in. I just like his blocking ability. I think he's an inline guy that can play early downs and be a sound auxiliary target. He's the classic Y. That's the classic quarterback's best friend. He might never catch a ball past 5 yards. But he's got good hands, and he actually is not bad with his routes. It's just that he's not a good athlete. He's more of an average athlete, but I do like his blocking, his willingness to scrap. So I feel like Barner should have a role in this league, even if it might be a day 3 pick.
Let's keep the Michigan Love Fest going here, Dane. Your last guy that is one of your guys outside of the consensus top 100. Who do you got for me?
Yeah, and I wanted to get one of these. I like a lot of these pass rushers on day 3. Jalix Hunt from Houston Christian's a good player. Mo Kamara from Colorado State. But I went with Braiden McGregor from Michigan, and I actually had him going to Detroit in my 7-round mock. He's a Michigan kid, born and bred, and he's a Wolverine, and could be a Lion, because I think he fits in terms of mentality, toughness, compete, all that kind of stuff. He fits what the Lions want to be. But yeah, he's got that first step quickness that really stands out, and he likes to get after the quarterback. He's tough. He grew up as a hockey player, so you see that toughness show up. He's not maybe the most complete player at this point in his development. Kind of reminded me of Alex Wright when he was coming out of UAB. Now he's just he's a role player for the Browns. I don't think he'd be drafted in the 3rd round like Alex Wright was, but I think somewhere 4th through the 6th round, he's going to provide some pretty good value as a sub-package rusher. Maybe he ends up being more, but I just like the play personality that he brings. Every snap, he's going to go kill the quarterback, and I can win with guys like
that. Sorry, that was a great way. He's going to murder somebody, and that's what I want.
All I do is inflict pain on other people, and that's who I'm looking for, Dane Brugler. All right, guys, that is all we got. Those are your guys in this year's draft, and thankfully we will be covering pretty much every pick, at least the first 3 rounds of this year's draft. So hopefully we're going to see plenty of your guys come off the board and get to talk about them. Quick reminder, nights 1 and 2, first 3 rounds, live on YouTube on the Athletic NFL YouTube channel. We will be in Detroit. Please come join us. We have a blast. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. If you've never checked out the live draft show, this is the time to start. So please come hang out with us on those couple nights because we are very much looking forward to it.
I have one last thing. Sorry to ruin that exit there, Robert. Travis Frederick just texted me back. He cleaned somewhere between 365 and 400. So that's what we're talking about with Murphy there, that he's cleaning as much as 330-pound Travis Frederick, who's one of the strongest human beings that you'll ever meet.
Murphy was 375, so
yeah.
Oof.
That's what you're after.
That's what you're after.
A guy who can hang clean a lot, hates being blocked, and likes to hurt people. So
Wants
checking
to
a
murder
lot of
people.
boxes for Dane Brugler. That is all we got, guys. We will be back on Friday this week. Me and my buddies Ben Solak and Danny Kelly, we're doing a fun little gimmicky draft thing that I think you guys will enjoy. So please come back and check that out. And then with the 3 of us, we'll have one more show before the draft kicks off next week. So please be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, really appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.